The men who were never supposed to return, came back as legends. In the skies above Nazi-occupied Europe, where death waited in the clouds and survival depended on split-second decisions, America sent pilots they didn't believe could fight. Men they had systematically told couldn't fly. Men whose courage would be tested not just against Hitler's vaunted Luftwaffe, but against their own country's deeply entrenched prejudice. Before they ever faced a German bullet, they had faced a lifetime of being told they weren't good enough. The air war over Europe was being lost. American bombers were falling from the sky at a rate that couldn't be sustained. For every 10 men who took off on bombing missions to cripple Hitler's war machine, 4 wouldn't return. The skies over Germany had become a graveyard of American aircraft and the young men who flew them. The Luftwaffe's fighters, particularly the deadly Messerschmitts, tore through bomber formations with ruthless efficiency. Something had to change, or the air offensive would collapse. Back in America, at a segregated airbase in Tuskegee, Alabama, a group of black pilots had completed their training, despite every obstacle the military could place in their way. The 332nd Fighter Group, soon to be known by the bombers they protected as the Red Tails, was about to enter the war. The military establishment had spent years insisting that black men lacked the reflexes, the intelligence, and the courage to fly combat aircraft. Now desperation was forcing them to test that theory. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. stood before his men on the tarmac of Ramitelli Airfield in Italy. The son of the first black general in the United States Army, Davis carried not just the weight of command but the hopes of millions of black Americans on his shoulders. His voice cut through the Italian winter air. "The eyes of the world are looking at you," he told his pilots. "Don't let them down. Don't let me down. More importantly, don't let yourselves down." For these men, failure meant more than just personal disappointment. Failure would confirm every racist stereotype they had fought against their entire lives. Success wasn't just about surviving, it was about proving that the color of their skin had nothing to do with their abilities as pilots and as men. Captain William Campbell, a bomber pilot in the 5th 10th Air Force, had heard the rumors about these new fighter escorts. As he prepared for another mission deep into Germany, he wasn't convinced that these inexperienced pilots would make any difference, especially once he heard they were colored boys from some experimental program. "They're sending us in with the Tuskegee boys today," his co-pilot mentioned during pre-flight checks. Campbell's heart sank. Great, rookies babysitting us over the most heavily defended airspace in the world. His bombardier, Lieutenant Peter Holcomb, was more direct. "If Hitler doesn't kill us, these new guys might get us all shot down." The laughter in the briefing room was nervous, edged with the very real fear of not returning. The black pilots heard these whispers. They absorbed the sideways glances, the barely concealed doubt, the explicit racism. But in the air, where skill was all that mattered, they were determined to prove themselves. Pilots like Charles McGee, Robert Buddy Lawson, and Lee Archer checked their aircraft with meticulous care. They knew that any mistake would be blamed not on the individual, but on their entire race. "We've got a job to do," McGee told his wingman as they climbed into their cockpits. "Let's go hunt some Germans." The bombers took off first, their Wright Cyclone engines thundering as they lumbered into the sky, heavy with bombs destined for German factories. The fighters followed, sleek P-51 Mustangs with distinctive red-painted tails. The black pilots slipped into formation alongside the bombers, ready for their first real test in combat. German radar operators picked up the incoming formation. Luftwaffe squadrons scrambled, led by experienced aces with dozens of kills to their names. Men like Major Erich Hartmann and Lieutenant Gunther Raoul, pilots who had cut their teeth on the Eastern Front against the Russians and who viewed American pilots with contempt. "The Americans are coming again," a German controller announced over the radio. Fighter escort identified as the Negro Squadron Hauptmann Werner Schröer. A Luftwaffe ace with over 100 victories smirked at the news. "The Americans must be desperate if they're sending their Negroes against us. This will be easy hunting." The first warning the bomber crews had of the German attack came when tracer fire streaked past their aircraft. The sky suddenly filled with Messerschmitt Bf-109s diving through the formation with guns blazing. The bombers' defensive gunners opened fire, but they were outmatched by the more maneuverable fighters. Fighters. 3 o'clock high. A voice crackled over the radio. "Jesus, there's dozens of them." Captain Campbell watched in horror as a B-17 to his right erupted into flames. The bomber rolled onto its back, spewing smoke and debris before plunging toward the earth below. He had seen it too many times before. Then something changed. The red-tailed P-51s broke formation and climbed to meet the German attack. Instead of scattering or flying defensively, they accelerated directly into the swarm of Messerschmitts. Lieutenant Lee Archer rolled his Mustang inverted, tracking a Bf-109 that was lining up on a bomber. His .50 caliber machine guns chattered, sending a stream of bullets into the German fighter. The Messerschmitt's cockpit shattered, and the aircraft spiraled away, trailing smoke. "Red 2, you've got one on your tail?" a voice warned over the radio. Captain Wendell Pruitt pulled his P-51 into a tight turn, forcing the German pilot to overshoot. In one smooth motion, Pruitt reversed his turn, slid in behind the Messerschmitt, and fired a short burst. The German fighter's wing separated from the fuselage, and the plane disintegrated in midair. The bomber crews watched in amazement as the red-tailed P-51s outmaneuvered and outfought the feared Luftwaffe. These weren't just pilots holding their own, they were dominating the skies. "Who the hell are these guys?" Campbell asked his co-pilot, as a P-51 flashed past their cockpit in pursuit of a fleeing Messerschmitt. In his P-51 christened Duchess, Captain Joseph Ellsbury spotted a formation of Focke-Wulf 190s climbing to attack the bombers from below. Pushing his throttle forward, he dived through the German formation, guns blazing. 2 FW-190s fell away trailing smoke, the others scattered. The Luftwaffe pilots, accustomed to American fighters breaking off to chase easy kills, were shocked when the Red Tails maintained their positions around the bombers. The black pilots had been given one primary order by Colonel Davis: stick with the bombers, while white fighter pilots often chased German fighters far from the bomber formation, seeking personal glory and confirmed kills for their records. The Tuskegee Airmen stayed disciplined, focused on their mission of protection. A German pilot, pulled from the wreckage of his aircraft later that day, expressed disbelief when told who had shot him down. "I was shot down by a Negro? That's impossible." But it wasn't impossible. It was happening with increasing regularity as the Red Tails established themselves as one of the most effective fighter groups in the European theater. The 332nd Fighter Group was changing not just the course of the air war, but challenging fundamental assumptions about race and capability. Back at Ramitelli Airfield, the pilots of the 332nd gathered to debrief after the mission. 5 German aircraft destroyed, no bombers lost to enemy fighters. It was an impressive tally, but Colonel Davis was not satisfied. "We did our job today," he told his men. "Tomorrow we'll do it better." The bomber crews who had initially regarded the black pilots with skepticism now requested them specifically. Word spread through the 5th 10th Air Force if you wanted to come home alive. You prayed for the Red Tails. Captain Campbell sought out the fighter pilots after they landed. He found Lieutenant Archer cleaning his gun camera footage. "I wanted to thank you," Campbell said, extending his hand. "You boys saved a lot of lives today." Archer looked up, surprised at the gesture. "We're just doing our job, sir." "Well, you're doing it damn well," Campbell replied. "Better than anyone else I've seen." This grudging respect from white pilots was hard-earned. The Tuskegee Airmen had to be not just good, but exceptional to be considered adequate. The standard for black pilots was perfection, while white pilots were allowed to make mistakes, to be average. As 1944 progressed, the legend of the Red Tails grew. The Luftwaffe, once the terror of the skies, found itself increasingly outmatched by these pilots who fought with a unique combination of skill and determination. It wasn't just about natural ability, it was about men who had trained harder, studied longer, and focused more intensely than anyone else because they knew the stakes of failure. On the ground, the Tuskegee Airmen faced a different battle. At officers' clubs in Italy, they were often refused service or told to use separate facilities. Towns near their base were often off-limits to black personnel. The very men who risked their lives daily to protect white bomber crews couldn't sit beside them in a mess hall. Lieutenant James Lance, a white bomber navigator whose life had been saved by the Red Tails, witnessed this discrimination firsthand. After a particularly harrowing mission, he invited several Tuskegee pilots to join his crew for drinks. "I'm sorry, sir," the club manager said, "but these men will need to use the colored entrance around back." Lance was stunned. "These men just saved my life. They're officers in the United States Army. Rules are rules." "Sir," the black pilots, accustomed to such treatment, began to leave, but Lance and his crew stood firm. "If they go, we all go." Small moments of solidarity like this occurred throughout the war, as men who fought together recognized the absurdity of segregation in the face of a common enemy. But these were exceptions, not the rule. The system of racial hierarchy remained firmly in place, even as black pilots proved their worth daily in the skies over Europe. Colonel Davis understood this reality better than anyone. A graduate of West Point, where he had endured 4 years of silence from white cadets who refused to speak to him except on official business. Davis knew that excellence was the only option for his men. Mediocrity was not a luxury they could afford. "We're not fighting for ourselves," he reminded his pilots. "We're fighting for those who will come after us in January 1944. The 332nd was assigned to escort bombers targeting an aircraft factory in Regensburg, Germany. Intelligence reports indicated heavy Luftwaffe presence in the area, including elements of Jagdgeschwader 26, the famous Abwehr Kids, one of Germany's elite fighter wings. Major Erich Hartmann, Germany's highest-scoring ace with over 300 confirmed kills, led the defense that day. Known as the Black Devil by Russian pilots who feared his tactical brilliance, Hartmann had never faced American black pilots before. "The Americans are sending their experimental Negro squadron," he briefed his pilots. "They will break and run when pressed. Target the bombers and the fighters will scatter to save themselves." How wrong he was. As the American formation approached Regensburg, German fighters rose to meet them in overwhelming numbers. The skies became a chaotic tangle of aircraft, contrails crisscrossing as fighters dueled at 25,000 feet. Lieutenant Howard Baugh spotted Hartmann's distinctive Messerschmitt with its black tulip design on the nose. Recognizing the marking of the famous ace, Baugh called to his wingman, "Stay tight." "This one's dangerous." Hartmann, expecting the black pilots to fly defensively, was surprised when Baugh and his wingmen pressed the attack. The German ace rolled his fighter into a tight turn, a maneuver that had spelled doom for countless Allied pilots. But Baugh stayed with him, matching the German turn for turn. The two fighters spiraled downward, each pilot seeking an advantage. Hartmann tried every trick in his considerable arsenal, the high yo-yo, the splitus, the rolling scissors, but Baugh countered each move. Finally, in a moment of frustration, Hartmann made a mistake, pulling his aircraft too hard and bleeding off too much energy. Baugh seized the opportunity, sliding his P-51 into firing position. His guns spoke briefly, and Hartmann's Messerschmitt shuddered as bullets tore through its engine. Smoke poured from the wounded fighter as it dived away, the German ace narrowly escaping with his life. For the first time in his illustrious career, Erich Hartmann had been outflown. Later, in the German debriefing, he would reluctantly admit, "These were not the amateurs we were led to believe. They flew with discipline and skill I have rarely encountered." The Regensburg raid marked a turning point. The Luftwaffe began to recognize the red-tailed P-51s and treat them with newfound respect. Some German pilots even avoided engaging them when possible, preferring to wait for bomber formations escorted by other fighter groups. By the spring of 1944, the reputation of the 332nd had spread throughout the 5th 10th Air Force. Bomber crews cheered when they learned the Red Tails would be their escort. The group developed a remarkable record. Once they began flying bomber escort missions regularly, they rarely lost a bomber to enemy aircraft. This wasn't just luck or propaganda. The Tuskegee Airmen had developed tactics specifically suited to their primary mission of bomber protection, while other fighter groups allowed their pilots more freedom to pursue enemy aircraft. Colonel Davis enforced strict discipline. His pilots stayed close to the bombers, worked in coordinated teams, and focused on defense rather than running up individual scores. "We can't afford to be glory hunters," he told them. "Every bomber that gets home is a victory for us." The spring and summer of 1944 saw the air war over Europe reach its climax. The Luftwaffe, once dominant, was being ground down by attrition, fuel shortages, and the loss of experienced pilots. But they remained dangerous, especially when defending high-value targets inside Germany. On August 24, 1944, the 332nd was assigned to escort bombers targeting Ploiești, Romania, home to oil refineries critical to the German war effort and one of the most heavily defended targets in Europe. Anti-aircraft guns bristled around the refineries, and the remaining Luftwaffe fighters had been concentrated to defend this vital resource. Captain Wendell Pruitt led a section of P-51s that day. As the bomber formation approached Ploiești, the sky ahead filled with black puffs of anti-aircraft fire. Through this deadly gauntlet, German fighters emerged, targeting the vulnerable bombers. "Red section, stay tight," Pruitt ordered over the radio. "Don't chase them away from the bombers." Messerschmitt flashed past Pruitt's canopy, rolling inverted as it lined up on a B-24 Liberator. Pruitt slammed his throttle forward, catching the German in a textbook deflection shot. The Messerschmitt erupted into flames, rolling away from the bomber formation. Lieutenant Walter Manning found himself separated from his section, surrounded by 3 Focke-Wulf 190s, outnumbered and low on ammunition. Manning used his aircraft's superior high-altitude performance to climb away from the Germans, then rolled over and dived back into the fight, surprising the enemy pilots who thought he was retreating. Manning's guns chattered briefly. A German fighter fell away, streaming fuel. The others scattered, unwilling to press their numerical advantage against a pilot of such skill and determination. The Ploiești raid succeeded, with minimal losses despite the fierce defense. The 332nd's performance that day earned them a Distinguished Unit Citation, recognition that was rare for any unit. let alone one composed of black airmen whom many had predicted would fail. As the war ground on into 1945, the Luftwaffe was increasingly depleted, but a new threat emerged. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. Faster than any Allied piston-engine fighter, the Me-262 could slash through bomber formations almost untouched, then accelerate away before escorts could respond. On March 24, 1945, the Red Tails encountered these jets for the first time. Escorting B-17s to Berlin, the heart of the Nazi regime, they watched in awe as contrails streaked toward the bomber formation at unprecedented speed. "What the hell are those?" a voice crackled over the radio. "Jets," replied Colonel Davis calmly. "Me-262s. Don't try to chase them. Position yourselves between them and the bombers and force them to come through us." The German jets were piloted by the remnants of the Luftwaffe's elite, experienced aces transferred to the jet squadrons for one final effort to stem the Allied air offensive. They expected to cut through the American formation with impunity, using their superior speed to dictate every engagement. Captain Charles McGee watched as a Me-262 lined up for an attack run on the bombers. Instead of giving chase, which would have been futile against the faster jet, McGee positioned his P-51 directly in the Germans' path. It was a dangerous gamble. The jet was coming head-on at over 500 miles per hour. The German pilot focused on the bombers, spotted McGee's P-51 too late. Forced to break off his attack run, the jet shot past the American formation. As it did, Captain Lee Archer, who had anticipated the jet's path, rolled in behind it. The Me-262 had one critical weakness. When turning, it bled energy rapidly and became vulnerable. Archer fired a long burst, his tracer rounds arcing through the sky. The jet's engine erupted in flames. The Me-262 rolled over and plunged toward the earth. Its revolutionary technology no match for Archer's skill and tactical awareness. By the end of the war, the 332nd Fighter Group had flown more than 15,000 sorties, destroyed 112 enemy aircraft in the air and another 150 on the ground, and damaged over 600 rail cars, 350 vehicles, and 40 boats. But their most remarkable achievement was their escort record. The Red Tails rarely lost a bomber to enemy aircraft, a claim that no other fighter group could make. This extraordinary record wasn't due to luck or the declining state of the Luftwaffe. It was the result of superb training, iron discipline, and men who fought with the knowledge that they carried the hopes and dreams of millions of black Americans on their shoulders. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, the Tuskegee Airmen returned to an America that still refused to treat them as equals. Many were denied service at the same restaurants that welcomed German prisoners of war. They returned to segregated water fountains, separate seating on buses, and limited opportunities despite their proven heroism. Captain William Campbell, the bomber pilot who had initially doubted the black fighter pilots, confronted this reality when he invited Captain Lee Archer to join him for dinner at a restaurant near an airbase in the southern United States. "I'm sorry, sir," the hostess told Campbell, "but we don't serve colored here." Campbell was incredulous. "This man is a captain in the United States Army Air Forces. He's shot down German jets and saved dozens of American lives." "That may be, sir, but rules are rules." Archer placed a hand on Campbell's shoulder. "It's all right. I'm used to it." "Well, I'm not," Campbell replied, turning to leave. "And I never will be." Small moments of solidarity like this began to chip away at the edifice of segregation. The Tuskegee Airmen's record of excellence was so undeniable that it became a powerful argument for integration. When President Harry Truman issued Executive Order 9981 in 1948, desegregating the armed forces, the success of the 332nd Fighter Group was a compelling example of why such change was both necessary and possible. Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who had led the Red Tails throughout the war, went on to become the first black general in the United States Air Force. Many of his pilots remained in military service, helping to integrate the Air Force and train the next generation of pilots regardless of race. Others returned to civilian life, using the discipline and determination that had served them in combat to fight a different kind of battle, the long struggle for civil rights. They had proven themselves against Hitler's best. Now they would prove themselves against the prejudice and discrimination that still plagued American society. The legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen extended far beyond their combat record. They had demonstrated that courage, skill, and intelligence knew no color barrier. In doing so, they not only contributed to the defeat of fascism abroad, but struck a blow against racism at home. In later years, as their story became more widely known, surviving members of the 332nd were often asked how they had maintained their composure and Professionalism in the face of such pervasive discrimination. Lee Archer, who finished the war with 4 confirmed aerial victories, offered a simple explanation. We knew that we had to be better than good. We had to be exceptional because we weren't just flying for ourselves. We were flying for every black American who would come after us, for every black child who would look up at the sky and dream of being a pilot. How could we do anything less than our absolute best? In 2007, over 60 years after their wartime service, the Tuskegee Airmen were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor bestowed by Congress. President George W. Bush, presenting the medal, acknowledged the double victory they had won for all the unreturned salutes and unforgivable indignities. I salute you for your service to the United States of America. The men who had once been told they lacked the courage, intelligence, and skill to fly combat aircraft had not only proven that assessment wrong, they had set a standard of excellence that few could match. They had outflown Hitler's elite airmen in the skies over Europe, and in doing so, they had begun to change America itself. When asked about his experiences years after the war, Captain Charles McGee summed up the attitude that had carried the Tuskegee Airmen through combat and beyond. We did not fly with our skin color. We flew with our skill and determination, and in the air, against an enemy who wanted to kill us. That was all that mattered. The legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen lives on today, not just in military aviation, but in the broader struggle for equality and respect. Their red-tailed P-51s may no longer patrol the skies, but the trail they blazed continues to guide those who follow, a reminder that excellence is the most powerful answer to doubt, and courage the best response to prejudice. If this story moved you, please take a second to like this video. It truly helps us keep these untold stories alive. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover more real stories of black heroes whose courage changed the course of history.